a book or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Jonathan Roger, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the June 7th, 2026 issue of the front section of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The first article is entitled, "At School, Apps Pushed Teens to Stay on Screens" by Jennifer Valentino DeVries. There's a photo of the back of a young teenager, and the caption reads, "A school day in San Mateo, California. More than 1,400 school districts have filed lawsuits against leading social media companies." And in the photo, the child is holding a phone to their ear. Snapchat sent phone alerts to adolescents during school hours, urging them to share what was going on in their classrooms. Meta paid teen ambassadors to promote Instagram and hand out swag to their friends at school. TikTok gave the National PTA millions of dollars, in part to throw school events about online safety and provide favorable comments to journalists. Again and again, the world's leading social media companies have targeted students, even as complaints have mounted that they are hurting teenagers' mental health and academic performance, according to a New York Times review of internal documents that lay bare, for the first time, these tactics to hook young users. The documents emerged from lawsuits filed by more than 1,400 school districts against Meta, Snap, TikTok, and YouTube, amid a rising backlash against social media, with parent movements and best-selling books blaming the platforms for loneliness, bullying, eating disorders, and sexual exploitation. The outcry, long focused on social media's harm to mental health, has now shifted to its upending of the classroom. Many school districts are banning smartphones, and some are reevaluating their reliance on devices like Chromebooks, the inexpensive laptops made by YouTube's parent company, Google. The company's push to keep children glued to their screens has overshadowed concerns from their parents, teachers, and even their own trust and safety teams about interfering with school, according to the documents and interviews with dozens of parents, teachers, and former tech company employees. TikTok's leaders decided not to disable notifications during school hours, rejecting a change that its safety teams had pushed for years. A Snapchat strategy document referred to classroom phone use as under-the-desk time. Google managers knew YouTube was recommending videos to students during the school day that had nothing to do with their lessons. The school districts contend that the app's addictive designs made teachers' jobs more difficult. It is so constantly tempting to these kids to be on a platform that promises endless, infinite, varied entertainment rather than actually focusing on what they should be at school to do, said Previn Warren, one of the lead lawyers for the schools. The companies argue that the COVID pandemic and other factors have harmed adolescents' mental health, and that parents, schools, and cell phone makers bear responsibility for children's phone habits. They also say that they have made their platforms safer with parental control features and account restrictions for minors. All four companies recently settled with Breathitt County Schools, a small district in rural Kentucky that served as a test case, the district, which has about 1,500 students, had sought $3 million in damages and about $60 million that it had planned to put toward a long-term education and mental health plan. The companies agreed to pay Breathitt $27 million, $9 million from Meta, $8 million each from Snap and TikTok, and $2 million from Google, according to documents released on Friday and first reported by Bloomberg. While it's hard to say how the ongoing litigation might ultimately affect classrooms, it poses a substantial financial risk to the companies, possibly costing billions of dollars, said Alexandra Lahav, a civil litigation professor at Cornell Law School. She noted that the companies were also facing a barrage of claims from families and state attorneys general. Breathitt was the first of 6 so-called bellwether cases whose outcomes are likely to guide the rest. The next plaintiff in line for trial, Tucson Unified School District in Arizona, which has about 40,000 students, is seeking more than $1 billion. These are massive, massive lawsuits, Ms. Lahav said. Winning with teens. In the early days of social media, before the industry came under angry public scrutiny, some company leaders were candid about their pursuit of teenagers, a key demographic that they knew could drive the next hit app and yield lifelong users. In 2012, a few months after the launch of Snapchat, its co-founder, Evan Spiegel, then 21, wrote a blog post about feedback he had heard from some of the app's early users. We were thrilled to hear that most of them were high school students who were using Snapchat as a new way to pass notes in class, Mr. Spiegel wrote, indicating that peaks of activity occurred during school hours. Meta also tried to promote its brand in schools, desperate to keep young users from leaving its flagship apps, Facebook and Instagram, for competitors. Winning schools is the way to win with teens, read an internal document from 2018. Beginning that year, the company recruited teen ambassadors to, quote, act as our plug at local high schools within 5 key markets, end quote. The students received branded gear to share, and they earned $45 gift cards for completing monthly challenges such as posting Instagram video chats with friends. Leah Emanuel, a former teen ambassador who is now an artist in New York City, said her Instagram followers supported her when she was bullied at school, but she now feels conflicted about the role she played in encouraging other young people to use the platform. In recent years, I have been rethinking it, she said. She still feels addicted to posting online and believes it is unhealthy. I didn't understand that at 14. Meta said its outreach efforts at schools, including the Ambassadors Program, had largely focused on promoting kindness and soliciting feedback on new products. We proudly work with parents, schools, safety organizations, and teens themselves to inform safety features, said Liza Crenshaw, a spokeswoman for Meta. She added that some of the documents produced in the lawsuit represented the ideas of individuals, not the company. Google employees cited classrooms as a source of long-term customers. A 2020 slide deck said that, quote, investing in schools helps onboard kids into Google's ecosystem, end quote. With its Chromebook laptops and software tailored for schools, Google has come to dominate the educational technology market over the past 15 years. That business boomed during the pandemic as many districts provided students with their own devices for remote learning. The majority of U.S. schools now use Google products to teach. Members of the company's education department were often excited about products they thought could improve learning, such as affordable laptops and educational YouTube videos, according to court documents and interviews. They worked alongside product managers, however, who were focused on a different upside, increasing YouTube's viewership. In one 2015 memo, YouTube employees noted that Saturdays drew 80 million hours more watch time than Thursdays, and that increasing usage in schools Monday through Friday could decrease this gap. It was clear even back then that YouTube was proving problematic for schools, according to documents first reported by the Wall Street Journal. The company's education team repeatedly complained that the algorithm often led children into a spiral of unrelated content. One slide presentation illustrated how this could happen. If someone began a YouTube session with a query about linear equations, the platform would first offer a learning video, the presentation showed, but after that, the algorithm would recommend a Will Ferrell comedy video. A Google spokesman said the documents were outdated. In 2022, the company released a tool that allows teachers to remove ads and recommendations on videos they assign students to watch, said the spokesman Jose Castaneda. He also said that YouTube could be blocked and that browsing on the site had been turned off by default on school Chromebooks for a decade. But teachers and parents said that even when YouTube and other sites were blocked, students used internet proxies and other workarounds, and schools often allowed YouTube browsing so children could do research, which Google said highlighted its educational value, but which made policing its use more difficult. Joanna Houston, the mother of a sixth grader in Richmond Hill, Georgia, said her son watched more than 1,500 non-educational YouTube videos on his Chromebook during school between August and January. She was concerned that her son's school had embraced Chromebooks and YouTube, but she blamed Google for marketing to schools and making it so easy to mindlessly consume its content. It's this whole ecosystem that ultimately benefits this company, and I don't think it very much benefits students, she said. Cause and drama. The companies heard complaints not only from parents and teachers, but from their own internal trust and safety teams. At a conference on student safety in 2023, SNAP representatives met with education officials from across the United States. According to internal emails, school administrators there raised alarms about their experiences with Snapchat, including children as young as 9 sending nude pictures. A superintendent from Alabama told the executives he had warned about the app in a newsletter to parents, which he shared with them. Quote, Snapchat is the #1 cause of drama in school-aged children, end quote, it said, citing bullying and inappropriate images. Quote, if you want to protect your child, make them delete it, end quote. That same year, a Snap employee pushed back against a new feature that sent high school students phone notifications during the day. The alerts urged the adolescents to share what was in their backpack or what their class was up to. The employee said that children should be able to opt out of the notifications to, quote, avoid legal risks around dark patterns, end quote, a term referring to manipulative design features. The suggestion was not taken. A Snap spokeswoman said that the company was pleased to have resolved the Breathitt lawsuit amicably and that many of the documents showed that the company was listening to feedback. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the front section of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. "We do not target schools," said Monique Bellamy, the spokeswoman, adding that Snapchat is simply popular among teenagers. "We care deeply about the safety and well-being of all Snapchatters, and our teams have worked for years to raise the bar on safety." At TikTok, some employees warned that frequent interruptions in the classroom would lead to backlash. Quote, "Teachers are going to hate it," end quote, an employee wrote in 2022 to an internal group focused on child safety, referring to a new feature prodding users to post within the next 3 minutes. Quote, "Kids already have a smartphone addiction in class," end quote. In response, a manager said the team's job was to support as well as challenge the business. Competitors, she said, were doing the same thing. Quote, "If we assume teens are going to do this anyway, we'd rather them be here on TikTok," she wrote. The company removed the feature in 2023. That same year, TikTok considered turning off notifications altogether for minors during school hours, but the plan was scrapped. Internal documents about the feature noted that it would reduce the number of daily active users and that it would be difficult for the company to administer because of the variety of school schedules. TikTok declined to comment on the internal documents about app features that affected children in school. A spokeswoman said the app had dozens of privacy and safety settings, including parental controls. PTA propaganda. Leading technology companies have long partnered with parent-teacher associations to burnish their reputations and promote internet safety. But the new documents show how the National PTA, a nonprofit that represents about 22,000 local chapters, actively solicited such contracts. In a 2024 email pitching its services to Snap, the National PTA promised it could, quote, "help with sentiment," end quote, and create, quote, "more understanding and comfort," end quote, among parents. Snap ultimately declined to offer funding. Exactly how much the National PTA has received from social media companies remains secret, but some details emerged in the documents. In 2024, a National PTA official told Snap executives that companies generally paid the organization $250,000 to $500,000 a year, and that a handful gave millions of dollars a year. Parents, students, and school communities rely on PTA to help them navigate the challenges of a changing world, said Heidi Mae Wilson, a spokesman for the National PTA, in a statement responding to questions about the lawsuit documents. That includes technology and social media, which are now central parts of children's lives. TikTok signed the first of several contracts with the group in 2019, just as the app's thriving business in America was coming under fire. Prominent lawmakers like Marco Rubio, a Florida senator at the time, had accused its Chinese parent company, ByteDance, of censorship, portraying it as a propaganda tool of the Chinese Communist Party. The deal with the National PTA aimed to, quote, positively raise ByteDance's profile among parents, end quote, according to a PTA slide deck for the company that was quoted in a plaintiff brief. In November 2019, a national PTA employee asked its new sponsor where it should host an internet safety event. In emails, TikTok employees discussed that the ideal schools would be in major market centers and sensitive political districts. Tampa, which was represented by Mr. Rubio and had the most populous TV viewing area in Florida, met both criteria. The National PTA gave a county chapter $1,000 to put on the event at Buchanan Middle School. In addition to about 75 parents and children, local TV reporters showed up to the cafeteria event in February 2020. Surrounded by balloons with TikTok's logo, parents talked about screen time rules, and a panel of students answered questions. A local influencer said that TikTok had helped her build a career traveling the world. While many parents appreciated that the event helped them talk about social media with their children, the influencer's presence felt like, quote, propaganda, end quote, said Damaris Allen, who was then the chapter president. I just remember being very, very annoyed, they said. Later that year, TikTok gave the National PTA $2 million for support during the pandemic. It paid an additional $3 million in 2024 for the group to promote the company's youth safety efforts, including providing, quote, positive, end quote, quotes to news outlets. The TikTok spokeswoman said the company was proud to fund the organization. Last December, a publication in Northeast Ohio covered a TikTok-sponsored event about online safety. A national PTA representative told the outlet, quote, "It was important for the youth to illustrate how they use platforms and how they use TikTok for good," end quote. The next article is entitled Democrats' Dilemma: Preserve Diversity or Pursue More Seats by Clyde McGrady. Columbia, South Carolina. South Carolina Democrats at Representative James Clyburn's world-famous fish fry just over a week ago were feeling triumphant. Mr. Clyburn, South Carolina's longest-serving black lawmaker and the state's lone Democrat in Congress, had survived a failed redistricting attempt by state Republicans determined to act after the Supreme Court weakened protections under the Voting Rights Act for majority black districts. So as the sun set on a terrace above the Congaree River in Columbia, a crowd of black women line danced to 803 Fresh's Boots on the Ground, while hot grease popping in deep fryers sent a thick smell of fish through the late spring air. But the next act in the drama over black representation will be driven in part by Democratic leaders, some of them black, who face a difficult situation. Do they preserve the majority black, overwhelmingly Democratic districts in blue states like New York, Illinois, Maryland, and New Jersey, or do they maximize Democratic representation in the House by diluting urban districts dominated by black voters and expanding their boundaries into the suburbs? Doing the latter would allow them to target Republican House members in those states. Those new districts would remain Democratic, though less so, but they may no longer be majority black. So, black voters could lose power in two ways: by losing the number of districts they dominate and by losing the number of black voices in Congress. It could be an agonizing choice, but with Republicans determined to maximize their own representation, many black Democrats at the grassroots state and federal level are firmly in the camp that the party should do what is necessary to expand its power. Black representation is important, but they consider this moment an emergency. We're not going to sit back and just accept this cheating and gerrymandering, said Representative Gregory Meeks, a close ally of a fellow New Yorker, Hakeem Jeffries, the House Democratic leader. Both men are black. In the weeks since the Supreme Court's Voting Rights Act decision, which lowered the bar on what it considered unconstitutional racial gerrymandering, Republican states in the South have led a furious effort to dilute or eliminate congressional districts where majorities of black voters have typically elected Democrats. Majority black districts in Tennessee and Louisiana are gone. One seat long held by a black Democrat in North Carolina is teetering. The Supreme Court on Tuesday night gave Alabama Republicans permission to eliminate one majority black seat. Georgia and Mississippi are likely to target such seats ahead of 2028. Beneath the jubilation at his fish fry, Mr. Clyburn seemed to acknowledge the anger. I want all of the energy that's here tonight to be harnessed, much like we harnessed the atom in order to make the atomic bomb, he implored the crowd from the stage. Beyond anger, Democrats are pondering the path back to political power and how far the party should go to attend it. Mr. Jeffries last month took on maximalist tones as he rattled off 7 states, New York, New Jersey, Washington, Colorado, Oregon, Illinois, and Maryland, that Democrats would redistrict in response to Republicans to, quote, to wipe out any structural advantage that they're trying to get themselves, end quote, in the South. A central calculation will have to be the value of black representation and whether the Democratic-controlled states should protect highly concentrated urban seats in New York, Newark, Baltimore, Minneapolis, and Chicago, rich in black voters, or push the boundaries of those districts into whiter suburbs to go after Republican seats. Mr. Meeks was clear on which way he wanted to go. We can look at seats like mine, for example, he said. Redrawing districts in Long Island would mean moving voters from his overwhelmingly Democratic district in Queens into 2 marginally Democratic districts in the western part of the island. That would give them better chances of ousting 2 Republicans to the east. Quote, we can then win 2 more seats on Long Island, end quote, Mr. Meeks said. Likewise, pushing Democratic voters south from the heavily black Brooklyn districts represented by Mr. Jeffries and Representative Yvette Clarke would endanger the Staten Island seat held by Representative Nicole Maliotakis, a Republican. We can win seats in upstate New York, Mr. Meeks said. We can win seats on Staten Island. Similarly, reconfiguring Representative Jonathan Jackson's Democratic district on the south side of Chicago to the south and west would push more Democratic voters into a district now held by a Republican, Representative Darren LaHood. Representative LaMonica McIver's overwhelmingly Democratic district in New Jersey could be drained of some voters to target the swing district held by a Republican, Representative Thomas Kean Jr. Representative Ilhan Omar's overwhelmingly Democratic district in Minneapolis could be expanded into the Twin Cities Democratic suburbs, starting a chain reaction that would push Democratic voters into a district held by Representative Tom Emmer, a Republican. Maryland Democrats are likely to extend Representative Sarah Elfreth's Democratic district around Annapolis across the Chesapeake Bay into the Eastern Shore to endanger the last Republican House member in the state, Andy Harris. But to do it, they may want to send some voters in Representative Kwesi Mfume's strongly black Democratic district around Baltimore to shore up Ms. Elfreth, who is white. This is not the game we want to play, Mr. Meeks said, but this is the game we are compelled to play. The price for such moves is already playing out in Florida, where state Republicans redrew the House districts to their advantage in November. The South Florida district of Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz, a senior Democrat who is white, was redrawn to heavily favor Republicans, so she has decided to run instead in one of the remaining Democratic seats where black voters remain powerful. That has enraged black Democratic politicians who want to represent the seat and have demanded that Democratic leaders speak out against Ms. Wasserman Schultz's move. We have been supporting every single Democratic person on the ballot, and for them not to support us in this moment is totally ridiculous, and we're not standing for it, former Representative Sheila Scherflis McCormick told the Miami Herald last week. Mr. Clyburn was hesitant to engage in the debate. He is not just one of the most powerful black elected officials in America. He is a fierce defender of the South, and he insisted the Republican effort to redistrict the region offends its people. The decision by South Carolina's state Senate to leave the state's congressional map alone, for now at least, is proof of that, he said. The South, I think, is doing a great job of searching for a more perfect union and getting there, and that's what insulted some of the members of the South Carolina Republican Party, Mr. Clyburn said in an interview. Mr. Clyburn prides himself on the relationship he has built with South Carolina Republicans and is complimentary of those Republicans who joined Democrats to block redrawing his district. He pointed to the rebellious streak of the Southern psyche, which resisted President Trump's demand that the state gerrymander away its last Democratic House seat. I cannot in good conscience surrender this authority that has been preserved to, for, and by the states and merely take orders from those who are not in South Carolina, Shane Massey, the Republican leader of the South Carolina Senate, said during a May floor speech. But Mr. Clyburn is also a student of history, and he spoke of the end of Reconstruction when America abandoned its commitment to the Southern freedom and the courts nullified laws protecting black civil rights. Having a diverse Congress isn't just good for black people, Mr. Clyburn argued. The value is to the country. He said, it is essential for a legitimate multiracial democracy. There is real trepidation about losing that racial diversity, whether it is done by Republicans or Democrats. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the front section of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier radio reading service. Every state should be drawing maps based on their actual constituents, said Angela Crittenden, a black South Carolinian at the Fish Fry. Our representation is minimal, and it's because of the illegal gerrymandering of the maps. That's historically already been enacted upon our maps in South Carolina. Democratic leaders say black voices would not be silenced simply because they are moved into districts where they are no longer dominant. Communities that have either been marginalized or don't have a seat at the table should always be a consideration, Ms. Clark, the chairwoman of the Congressional Black Caucus, said. But she added, "We have dozens of CBC members who represent districts that have very small black populations. Those include Representatives Lauren Underwood of Illinois, Joe Neguse of Colorado, and Lucy McBath of Georgia. The 4 black Republican House members, Byron Donalds of Florida, Wesley Hunt of Texas, John James of Michigan, and Burgess Owens of Utah, also fit that bill. The gerrymandering wars would not sideline black voices," State Senator Dion Tedder of South Carolina said at the Fish Fry. "On the contrary, quote, black voters woke up and realized their power," he said, end quote. "We have to fight," Mr. Tedder said. "Our constituents want us to fight. If we continue to sit on the sidelines and go along to get along, we will continue to lose seats, and we will continue to lose power, and we will continue to disenfranchise our own voters." The next article is entitled, "In English Thatcher's Fight, It's Straw versus Reed," by Rukmini Calamachi. There's a photo of a large Tudor house with a person standing on a ladder working on the roof of the house, which is a tan color. Redgrave, England. If you were buying a house in a notoriously rainy country, would you choose one with a roof made of straw? Across England, buyers are paying extraordinary sums to do exactly that. Thatched homes, once associated with peasant life, are now among the most coveted properties in a country where nostalgia for a distant and mythologized past runs deep. A storybook landscape of shires, low beams, and misty sheep meadows. In April, the actress Sienna Miller relisted her thatched cottage in Buckinghamshire for £1.75 million, or $2.35 million. So enduring is the appeal that Richard Branson, the billionaire founder of Virgin Group, hired British thatchers to roof his Caribbean home. But beneath the layers of thatch, a feud is simmering among England's tiny fraternity of so-called master thatchers. For the most ardent traditionalists, the only true thatch is long straw, typically cereal straw, like wheat, which is threshed to remove the grain, believed by historians to be England's original roof. Then there's water reed, the more durable alternative that is increasingly imported from abroad. For the master thatcher Stephen Lech, the difference is unmistakable. The problem is that for almost everyone, it's undetectable, which is one reason long straw roofs are going extinct. There's a photograph on the second page of the article that is captioned, "A long straw roof on a home that is over 400 years old in Suffolk, England, is one of many installed by the master thatcher Stephen Lech. He has spent much of his life trying to preserve the dying art." And it pictured is a cottage with a faded straw roof that has been faded to a gray-brown color. There's 20 or 30 long straw thatchers left in all of England, said Mr. Lech, 66, who has spent much of his life trying to preserve this dying art. We're the last, and we know we're the last, and we know that once we're gone, those skills will be lost. On an afternoon in May, standing beside a 438-year-old cottage in the village of Redgrave in the county of Suffolk, Mr. Lech ran his rough hand over the edge of a roof he had installed himself. "Do you see how it looks like it's been poured?" he asked. Mr. Lech was pointing out the fluid texture of the dried thatch blanketing the house, a soft, seamless look, as though a thick golden liquid had oozed over the cottage and its eaves. This is the signature of long straw thatch, part of a roofing tradition in Britain believed to date back from the Bronze Age. Long before Britain was stitched together by a railway, roofs were made from whatever grew nearby, like heather in the northern highlands and reed near bogs and waterways. Overwhelmingly, though, most areas of the country used straw, a byproduct of the wheat grown to make bread, according to historians. It's a lightweight material that keeps homes well insulated in the summer heat and the winter cold, but it's also flammable, attracts insects and spiders that feed on them, and requires costly maintenance. According to one assessment, 90% of thatched roofs in England and Wales were made of straw before 1800, with the remaining share split between waterweed and grasses like heather. Now that percentage has been inverted as more and more houses are rethatched with more durable reed, but it's not sourced from the local river. Much of it is shipped from Eastern Europe and China. We do get asked the question, well, what is the value of it, Mr. Lech said, of the long straw? Tradition, he answered, before dropping his voice. But you can't see the tradition because it all looks the same. The roof England forgot. History sits front and center in the English villages that still have thatched cottages. The stretch of Suffolk where Mr. Lech learned his trade is name-checked in the Domesday Book, a survey of all the land in England commissioned in 1085 by William the Conqueror. Nearly a millennium later, Led Zeppelin made a 19th century thatcher the embodiment of English folklore on the cover of its fourth album. And yet, a country obsessed with conserving its architectural past has quietly allowed many of its oldest roofs to disappear. It's mad to say that we are preserving a vernacular material but importing it from China, said Joe Cox, a buildings historian who wrote a history of thatching for England's historic preservation body. It's not hard to see why waterweed has won out. It lasts longer, up to 70 years versus 40 years for long straw, according to Julia Shelley, editor of The Thatcher's Standard, the publication of the National Society of Master Thatchers. And it's much easier to source and install. Quote, you can pick up the phone and say, I need 2,000 bunches of reeds, and they'll turn up next week, said the master thatcher Bodkin Willows, 38, while it can take up to a year to source the wheat for a long straw roof. The reed arrives from overseas in bundles that can go straight onto a roof. Long straw, by contrast, requires a preparation so elaborate that it has its own archaic vocabulary. Straw must be gabled, soaked in water, and sorted before being arranged in yelms and pinned into place with brooches or spars made from hazel sticks that have been sharpened into staples. Then there's the training required to become a long straw thatcher, which is so arduous it resembles a hazing ritual. When he was a 19-year-old apprentice, Mr. Lech learned to windshield a bucket of water onto the straw, a technique of throwing the water so that it moistens the fiber but doesn't soak them. On freezing mornings, he'd use a hammer to crack the ice that had formed over the bucket, then dunk his hands in the frigid water for 45 seconds until they were like red-hot pokers, he said. When he made a mistake, his mentor struck his numbed hands with a hazel brooch or stick. "It's very Neolithic, isn't it?" Mr. Lech chuckled. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the front section of the New York Times on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. To long straw traditionalists, the punishing apprenticeship is part of the point. It teaches the apprentice the values, Mr. Lech said, perseverance. But the very qualities that made long straw thatching so demanding also made it vulnerable in a modernizing England. The demise of long straw thatching began in the mid-1800s when railways allowed building materials like shingles and water reed to be transported across the country. By the early 1900s, straw roofs were being stripped and rethatched in reed. One reason was birds. Traces of grain left in straw attracted sparrows that burrowed into roofs. The birds were considered such a nuisance that churches often offered a bounty, a halfpenny for every sparrow head, according to parish records collected by Mr. Lech. Wire netting, invented in the 1840s, finally solved the problem, but was initially so expensive that it doubled the cost of a straw roof. Long straw acquired a reputation for being more fragile, more labor-intensive, and more expensive, a perception that persists today, even as the cost of netting has fallen to around 5% of the total bill. According to the master thatcher Christopher Essex, one of the craftsmen who was flown to the Caribbean for Mr. Branson's roof, water reed costs around 6 pounds per bundle and covers around 1 foot of a roof versus straw, which can cost as much as 16 pounds for a bundle that covers around 2 feet, he said. Covering an average cottage can run $40,000 to $50,000 US, not including the periodic replacement of the ridge, the topmost section of the roof, which needs to be replaced every decade, or the higher insurance premiums tied to fire risk. It's a known fact. Water reed lasts longer than long straw, said Mr. Essex, who dismissed concerns about imported reed as out of touch. To outsiders, the dispute may seem absurd. Britain has only around 60,000 thatched homes left, 0.2% of its housing stock, but among England's roughly 800 thatchers, the reed versus straw debate provokes enormous emotion and occasional fisticuffs. A conference in Oxford in the late 1990s nearly devolved into a brawl, said Ms. Cox, recalling how the mild-mannered academic chairing the event threatened to adjourn if the feuding thatchers didn't settle down. Part of its temperament, the work, often done alone high atop a ladder, tends to draw artisans with an independent streak, said Mr. Essex, describing at least 4 brawls he's seen. We know our own minds, and we stick to things, and In a small trade, disputes over how to thatch can become disputes over who gets the next job, and the fear that, quote, "you're stealing the bird out of my mouth," end quote, he said. In recent decades, some towns and villages passed rules calling for, quote, "like for like," end quote, replacements of thatch, but by then, water reed had won out. The distinction is mostly lost on thousands of owners of thatched homes. A spokeswoman for Savills, the agency selling Sienna Miller's home, was unsure which type of thatch covered the actress's 16th century cottage. Corrine and Martin Price, who bought their thatched cottage in the village of Saul nearly 3 years ago for £485,000, or $655,000 US, also couldn't say for certain which thatch they have. As far as I'm aware, it's straw, but I could be corrected on that, said Ms. Price, 53. It seems beside the point when they consider the romance of living in a house that was built in 1410. I 100% fell in love with it, she said, describing the house as almost like a living being. The roof, she said, gives the house a feeling that modern homes never could, warm, cozy, and especially organic, as though nature had not been shut out entirely, but was woven into the home itself. The next article is from the national section of the New York Times, and it's entitled, "In Black Churches Raising Dementia Awareness." Fusing Faith and Science to Narrow Gap in Care by Dana G. Smith. On a Thursday in April, a few hundred people, many of them older black women, sat in the main hall at Impact Church, located in a converted warehouse near the airport in Atlanta. The windowless sanctuary was dark, but theater lights and the crowd's energy illuminated the stage. In his prayer, the Reverend Paul Thibodeau, the church's lead pastor, called upon God to do some amazing things. "We are expecting you, God, to bring down wisdom like never before. We are expecting you, God, to increase our knowledge like never before." For this wasn't a typical sermon. Pastor Thibodeau was offering the Alter Dementia Summit, was opening the Alter Dementia Summit, a 3-day conference aimed at educating the Black faith community about Alzheimer's disease and other types of dementia. The event was an unconventional mix of faith and science. Research posters on community-based caregiving and how physical health affects the brain lined one wall of the church. Shortly after Pastor Thibodeau's prayer, Vanetta Dotson, the chief of neuropsychology at Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, took the stage to present strategies for improving cognitive health. When she said Bible study sessions could help by challenging the brain, the crowd murmured approvingly. Roughly 1 in 5 Black Americans 65 and older has Alzheimer's, compared with 1 in 10 white Americans, but it can take Black patients significantly longer to obtain a diagnosis, which limits treatment options and places an additional burden on caregivers. Experts have identified several factors that contribute to these statistics, including stigma and a lack of awareness about dementia in the Black community. There is also general distrust of the scientific and medical establishment, fueled by ongoing discrimination. Farron Epps, a professor of nursing at the University of Texas Health Science Center in San Antonio and the founder of Alter, is trying to address these disparities by tapping into places where trust runs deep: Black churches. According to Pew Research Center, 73% of Black Americans identify as Christian. The church has traditionally been quote, that haven, that safe place that individuals can go to, quote, Dr. Epps said. That is part of the culture that the church is here to help, she added. Why not make sure they have the resources? The spiritual and the tangible. According to data from the Alzheimer's Association, more than half of Black Americans assume that significant memory loss is a normal part of aging rather than a medical condition. Many times in the Black community, it can be called several other things: hardening of the arteries, senile, Dr. Epps said, or it's even just crazy. To help counter these misconceptions, Alter partners with Black faith communities around the country, providing education about dementia and brain health, as well as resources for caregivers. To the Reverend Jeff Obafemi Carr, Alter Summit's MC and the founder and chief spiritual officer of the Infinity Fellowship in Nashville, science and faith are natural partners. If we're going to address the spiritual needs of a human being, we also have to address their tangible needs, he said. That includes preaching about science and the brain. Mr. Carr spells his name in lowercase as a, quote, reminder to play his small role in the larger creation, end quote. Robert Reed, who previously served on Alter's Citizen Advisory Board, and his wife Kim are exactly the type of people Alter is hoping to help. Mrs. Reed first began experiencing symptoms of cognitive decline when she was just 48. She went to her doctor with concerns that she was having difficulty with executive functioning at work, but was brushed off and told it was a symptom of perimenopause. It would take 2 years and many visits to the doctor before she finally received a cognitive test, a referral to a neurologist, and a diagnosis of early onset Alzheimer's. Mr. Reed is now his wife's full-time care partner. He prefers the term over caregiver, or even worse, caretaker. Quote, we married, we became one, so we partner in everything, end quote, he said. So when she was diagnosed, I was diagnosed. Before Mrs. Reed's diagnosis, the couple really didn't know much about Alzheimer's, Mr. Reed said, and they didn't think they knew anyone who had it. They discover Mrs. Reed's grandparents most likely had dementia. Her mother and father would also go on to develop different forms of the condition. There is more to this article, and if you would like to learn more, hear more about this article, please call the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 716-821-5555. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the June 7th issue of the front section of the New York Times. We read from the front section of the New York Times every Sunday at 1 p.m. Your reader has been Jonathan Roger. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have a reading of the New York Times opinion page. Following that, at 3 o'clock, the New York Times Arts and Leisure, and at 4 o'clock, a rebroadcast of this morning's Buffalo News. Radio Reading mails out a large print program schedule to our listeners every other month. If you have not received a Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service large print program schedule in the mail, please call us at 716-821-5555. We will make sure that you receive one every other month. A Braille version of the schedule is also available upon request. Our number again is 716-821-5555. following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability